News here on Mackie and Judd. Tyrell Adams via the SKOR North app asks, after listening to Rick Spielman talk on the Moving the Sticks podcast this week, and just for the audience that didn't hear us talking about that on Purple Daily, Spielman came out and talked very openly on the Moving the Sticks podcast with Daniel Jeremiah and Bucky Brooks about his sort of unprompted, his failures to identify quarterbacks and how he put so much stock into measuring their intelligence, but not necessarily as much stock measuring their quickness in processing information. Christian Ponder is a great example of that, for instance. And so he said, if I could kind of go back or if I could take something going forward, it would be to better measure how quickly they process information. And so Tyrell Adams says in this comment, I really hope he applied what he learned when drafting Kellen Mond. I was high and still am high on Mond, but Rick's discussion on the Moving the Sticks podcast gives me a little more hope that he may have left us with a quarterback. Your thoughts?
I honestly think, in fairness to Mond, and the stuff that I've heard behind the scenes is not great. I honestly believe, though, that, and it's probably unfortunate and not fair to Kellen Mond, that 2022 is his first year. It's a reset. I don't think we can say. And I know for sure as hell we can't take 3 plays where he was forced into a game in Green Bay and be like, well, I saw something. No, you didn't see a thing there. We have no idea. He looked terrible. He should have looked terrible. He had no preparation. I don't think he probably had much, if any, support from people. So I am, as far as I'm concerned, not with just Mond, you guys, but with much of that draft class, including really the entire third round, I'm giving him a fresh look. I am convinced, as big a conspiracy theory as this sounds, I am convinced that the third round was held hostage by Mike, that it was a pissing match between GM and coach, that I don't know if Mike didn't like the picks or if Mike was just mad at Rick, but Wyatt Davis, that's ridiculous. What they did to that kid, I don't care unless he did something to get himself cut, which clearly he didn't. Inexcusable. So I am giving at least the third round, if not more, of that class an entire fresh look starting in training camp, because if anybody didn't get a fair shake in 2021, it's probably those kids.
Yeah, and if you look back at third, fourth round quarterbacks, there's only historically, like the last 20 years, maybe a 20 to 25% chance that any third round quarterback becomes a multi-year starter. So you're already up against it. Now, backup, okay, cool. So I don't think it's been realistic to expect Kellen Mond to be the heir apparent to Kirk Cousins. Like, he's much more likely to just be a backup or just flame out. But again, like, I agree with you. Did he really come in here with the right infrastructure to maximize his skill sets? When the head coach barely spends time with the starting quarterback, right, how are we supposed to expect an infrastructure to be in place to maximize the young backup quarterbacks?
Right.
And the other thing, too, I would point to, there's some weakness. I'm reading the NFL.com scouting report from Kellen Mond going into the draft last year and some of the weaknesses. So it's a lot of conservative stuff, like shies away from big play opportunities to make shorter throws, will miss late safety movement indicating incoming blitz. So, like, not necessarily reading and surveying things. And to me, that kind of falls in the category of not the fastest to process information. If you're checking, like, think about Christian Ponder, constantly checking down when bigger plays were available over the top, either because he was just nervous to make a throw down the field or because he wasn't processing, this is going to open up, I just need to trust it for another half second. So, but just by reading some of the weaknesses and some of the knocks on Kellen Mond, I wouldn't necessarily align it with the things that Rick learned. But it wasn't that long ago. Like, that draft pick was made 8 months ago.
Yeah. So
unless Rick had this epiphany after the draft, I would assume that he is applying his knowledge to the Kellen Mond pick. So I guess we'll see. I am excited for someone to come in here and just breathe some air into that quarterback room, though. Just like, let's make it less uptight, whether Kirk's in it or not. Like, God, that's the most important room in the franchise. And you had a head coach that was like, you had to drag him into a meeting on Thursdays with his starting quarterback. Like, whether it's Raheem Morris or Nathaniel Hackett, like Doug Peterson wrote an essay 3 weeks ago on how to build a championship quarterback room, right? That would be interesting. A guy that comes in and says, okay, Kellen Mond, Kirk Cousins, whoever it is, this is the most important room. Let's spend a bunch of time. Let's make each other better. Just change that room and change the culture. And it should help Kellen Mond.
Feels like it was year zero, as PJ Fleck said, for Kellen Mond. Year zero. In a redshirt year. Very much a college-like situation. I mean, the poor dude, also keep in mind, he got COVID. The training camp thing was weird. I don't think he really got a fair shake. He clearly was going to be a project from day one, but I agree. I don't think he got a complete fair shake. Year two, year one, whatever you want to call it, with 2022 with Kellen Mond, I think we'll see the true colors of him.
Yeah. Another one from Tyrell Adams here via the SKOR North app. Since Judd says over and over he's smarter than the Vikings front office, let's have Judd rank the quarterbacks in the upcoming draft. Damn, Judd needs to be humbled. This offseason is supposed to be fun. Why are you trying to buzzkill our fun this offseason?
As my late colleague Sid Hartman would say, this is a selective listener, because what I said is I want to help hire the GM and coach. I want to put the people in place who then have far more knowledge than I do at that point, because I've hired incredibly smart people to find the quarterback, to set what the offense is going to be. I am, damn it, a people person. I can tell if I'm being BS'd and schnookered on a guy on Zoom who tells me, of course I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. Oh, we're going to win next year. No, we're not. BS, you're gone. So I'm not asking to rank the quarterbacks, which is fun. I'll do it. That's fun. But I'm saying my area of expertise is to get the right people in place, to put the pieces in place to win a Super Bowl. That's what I do.
When are you going to admit that you were wrong? That's what I want to know.
I've been wrong about a lot in life.
Thursdays, Wednesdays on Mackie and Judd.
And I can tell you right now, ask Dawn or Stella. They will tell you at home wrong constantly. This is why I got sports, so I can be right.
A little more often. Let's hear right all the time.
So
let's keep hammering Judd here. Jesse Johnson via the SKOR North app says, I feel like Judd is never going to be happy with the Vikings' decisions. Phil and Declan are just as excited as I am for the new Vikings football, but Judd is just never going to be happy with it regardless. I listen to you guys every day. Keep up the good content. Love it.
Okay, that's not true again. Declan can speak this.
You are openly panicking about
I'm openly concerned. There's no question. And the news that continues to filter out has me more concerned. But ask Dex this, and I have gotten people who admit this. What am I, Dex? What am I positive, excited about, embrace completely now, and say that this guy knows far more about the sport than I do, and he's doing a marvelous job?
Dean Evison with the Wild.
And Bill Guerin.
Yeah.
And Bill Guerin. But why? Because they had and Craig Leopold got it wrong and got it right. The Wolves got it wrong. I think they're trending in the right direction now. What I'm saying is, and I wrote an entire column about this with the attributes that I want to see at skornorth.com. What I want the Vikings to do is to get it right. And if they're right, I'll be excited. But I'm not going to be the problem with thinking that, well, they know more and they're going to get this right. It's a Pollyanna attitude that's extremely dangerous, because then you're disappointed. I mean, Paul Fenton was hired. He had no people skills. Gerson sold Glenn, not shockingly, and his entire committee on that he was this family man, that he was going to inclusive, and that he was going to do this and that. And it turned out it sounds like a tyrant. And then, of course, had the extra marital affair that was inclusive but not positive. But my point is, get it right, win games, get the right people. I will be dancing in the streets.
I think, where I side with Jesse here is so. For instance, you have identified Andrew Miller, who is a former business side executive with the Blue Jays, comes from a baseball background. Yep. He's very influential in the Vikings front office and in the Vikings search for a GM, and probably in these coaching interviews too. And you look at that and say, oh, that's bad. Because he comes from the non-football side, then that's bad. And we actually had a listener, and I should have brought this to Feedback Friday. We had a listener who's a Blue Jays fan brought us sort of a write-up of Andrew Miller and his leadership style, and I read that and thought, oh, that's interesting. Like I've never met him in person. Yeah. I'm not going to pretend to like if I've never met him in person and there's not enough information out there, like it's hard for me to develop a take. I'm not going to rule him out as someone in the room just because he doesn't have a football background. Because if he has a sense for leadership, then I do want him in that room.
I agree with that. The problem is that my experiences of talking to people who know what goes on there is not positive.
So you really think you're suited to be the fourth guy in our group, Buzz Killington?
Look, Sports Dad has to do what Sports Dad does, but Sports Dad will be as excited as the rest of the group if they nail this and get this right. But don't forget the Wolves.
Then Sports Dad can admit that he was wrong about
and
being
the
nervous.
Wild. But or they're going to in 2 years be back to square one and then perhaps get it right then. Bill Guerin interviewed at the same time Fenton did. I guarantee you, Paul Fenton told Craig Leopold exactly what Craig wanted to hear. And I guarantee you, Bill, who shoots completely straight, didn't.
I'm going to read you something here. I think you could use this. So I follow Ryan Holiday on Instagram. He's a #1 best-selling author, and he practices stoicism. Okay, and he posted something on Instagram that made me think of Judd. He said, a stoic does not suffer imagined troubles. We are prepared for anything. We sometimes think about what the worst case scenario is. Okay?
Yep.
But what we don't do is borrow suffering from the future and suffer before we need to in anticipation of bad things that might happen. We look at things as they are right now, and that's how we're going to deal with the present moment.
You've opened up Pandora's box.
You are worrying about hypothetical things that have not happened yet.
Okay.
If they hire the Hamburglar as their general manager, then I will be panicking with you.
Okay. So in real life, the therapists call what he's talking about there foreboding joy, which is you're always concerned about what's next so you don't enjoy the moment.
Yeah.
In real life, that's a problem. I have it. In sports, it's a necessity. It's a necessity because I consider foreboding joy to also look at past mistakes and say, what did you learn? Because sports is it's completely different. It's not a business. It's not a Wall Street traded company. It's not normal. Sports is dysfunctional by its nature. And so what you have to do is be on guard. And there's a lot of smart, egotistical, manipulative people. What you have to do is be on guard for them because they'll get you. Gerson Rosas interviewed continually. The problem, and this is
he put together a pretty good roster too.
Yes, and he did, but they didn't like that. They didn't like now. If they said he's a tyrant, but we don't care, I'd be like, okay, cool, but you did care. So what did you do wrong? Like the Vikings could 1,000% go to school on three things here. One, it's a long time ago, but their own Fran Foley screw up. Like he was a tyrant. He told the secretary one day, "Don't come in tomorrow because we're going to fire so many people. It's going to be awful." And he looked forward to it. And the Wilfs were like, "No, you're not." But anyway, Paul Fenton and Gerson. So yes, I am continually looking out for worst case because far too many times the worst case people slip through the cracks. That's what happens in sports.
I do also subscribe to the legendary and polarizing Bobby Knight, who I am not a fan of, but he did write an interesting book about 10 or 15 years ago called The Power of Negative Thinking, which doesn't mean, this is where I think Judd misinterprets. Judd's always obsessed with the bad things that could happen. The book's message is be aware of the bad things that could happen, be prepared for them, but don't be consumed by them.
Well,
and there's a fine line.
But where's the line? Because like right now with Guerin and the Wild, I'm very bullish. I'm very positive because they got it right, in my opinion. They got this right. Mm-hmm. So I guess where I'm always expecting the worst is until you prove to me that you actually got the best.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but like over the next week and a half.
Yeah. Don't screw it up.
They'll hire a GM.
Don't screw it up.
Regardless of who they hire, we're not going to know anything about that GM for like 2 more years, really. So we won't know if their process was the right one or the wrong one. Like, we hypothetically won't know for like 2 more years. I think the coach will know a lot earlier.
Right.
Now, the roster is going to matter when we're evaluating the coach.
But that's why I'm trusting you not to screw up.
You don't
if
trust
you're the
them,
Wilfs.
though.
No, I don't trust them. I don't trust them, but I'm saying I have to.
Declan and I are putting blind trust in.
Exactly.
Yeah, we are.
And you are putting somewhat blind skepticism in, and that's what
I have to trust them, but I don't.
Well, you don't trust them. I think it's fair to say.
Right? No, but I have to, and that's my problem.
By the way, Ian Rappaport just came out.
Yes.
Dex just sent this to us and said after the Giants are hiring Joe Schoen as their GM.
Oh.
So he's the assistant GM of the Bills, which this is the first domino.
Mm-hmm.
And he says they'll go about the process of hiring a coach next. Expect Dan Quinn and Brian Flores to be on that list. We're going to talk a lot more about this domino on Purple Daily the next couple days here, so check that out. Dan Bania in the YouTube comment section says, "Hey, Mackie and Judd, you've got a young guy sitting to the left of you. Why don't you ever let him talk? The last 2 times I've watched your show, you have been microphone hawks." All right, Declan, give us a take. The floor is yours.
I'll give you the reason why I don't talk, not because I don't have the hashtag takes. I am making sure that this show is existing and on schedule, and making sure that Ian Rappaport news comes to these 2 clowns when it needs to get through. There's a lot of things that I am managing. You know, there's a great gif of like that octopus building bricks on a building. Like he has like 8 different arms laying foundation. That is me during the show. And then when I do have to get the microphone on, I'm still laying those bricks while trying to deliver some takes. So there's a lot of moving parts, and I get the notes too from friends. I'm like, why don't you talk more? Why don't you speak up a lot bit more?
You're welcome to talk.
Yeah, and I'm always welcome to talk.
We don't
I know
tell
that.
Declan not to talk.
Not to talk.
Declan's got pretty much everything you see. Like, we do these shows every day, but then everything you see on social and clips and everything on YouTube and stuff like.
And he's working too.
That's
so,
what
so like he's typing, he's working, and plus he talks a ton. It's called Judd's Hockey Show. He's the co-host and gives and spews takes. It's great.
If you want obsessive Kevin Fiala takes, Judd's Hockey Show. There's plenty of ammo in the ammunition there. There's plenty of stuff there.
Let's see here. Mitchell Smith via the SKOR North app says, "It seems to me that Zimmer was more interested in being right than leading the team. You shared his quote about spending on a quarterback from 4 years ago, and he predicts that he'll be fired if they do that," which he was right. So instead of figuring out how to win a different way than he was accustomed to, he'd rather just be fired so he can say, "I told you so." I mean, I don't think he's like consciously. I don't think he spent 4 years trying to get fired so he could prove a point by any means. But do I think that he was more interested in being right and doing things his way than adapting? Absolutely.
I love that note. I think that note is spot on. And in fact, I would argue. Hot take, I would argue by the end of Mike's time here, it was more important for him to take Rick with him than to keep their jobs. I think Mike privately is ecstatic. He gets paid, and he got and I believe, I mean, just a guess here, he played a role, if not a huge role, in Rick being dismissed too. But I think that's 1,000% right. I think what happened at the combine in February of 2018, what became the self-fulfilling prophecy of Mike being like, "I told you so," and the guy that screwed me, I'm getting him fired too. It feels like that, right?
It does kind of feel
I'm
that
totally
way.
guessing, but I mean, it feels like that.
It does. And the fact that, Deion Sanders confirmed they didn't speak for months, like they clearly hated each other. And there was a couple other quotes from Spielman in that Move in the Sticks podcast too, are just like, he didn't say, he wasn't being direct about names and stuff, but it's like, yeah, he's talking about Zimmer. Cliff, last one here. Cliff via the SKOR North app. "I have an observation about the Vikings. I've seen for at least 2 years that fear is the foundation for the coaching staff, and players confirm that. One of the earmarks of a fear-based organization is alligator arms. No one is going to risk anything. As you guys have observed, the I just work here mentality comes from more than just Kirk Cousins. It's a common trait for most personalities that are stuck in this fear-based environment." I mean, that's spot on too, right? Like, I think he nailed it. Now, it would be helpful if your quarterback wasn't just I just work here guy, that if he had a personality and some leadership qualities to balance out the tyrant coach, and they can be sort of yin and yang, but unfortunately the Vikings didn't have that.
Can I go so as far as to absolve Kirk just a bit though? Because the more that I think that those last two comments are just 1,000% right. The more that we discuss this and mash through what went wrong, I do think it's important to point out that to think that it was Mike, Rick, and Kirk who were the only toxic ones or something. That locker room, I don't think it's a stretch to say almost 1,000% had some toxicity to it that went well beyond Kirk. And I don't know
leadership.
And so like this is not Mike's gone and Rick's gone, and if Kirk's gone too, which I think Kirk should be gone, but if they're gone, it's fine. I think you would find that there was more than that. And now I know that those three guys are atop the marquee, but I think the whole thing, and that's why I said I think you have to go through it. And my guess is that we will be surprised that there was a toxic person or two that we probably don't expect.
Well, and maybe not even toxic, maybe just like blend in with the wallpaper. There just seems to be a lot of guys that blend in. Like, think about all the Vikings teams in the past. 2009 was a great Vikings team, right?
Yep.
And then think about all the spokespeople that team had.
Yep.
That were out front. And I know Matt Burke was gone by then, but like Matt Burke was that person beforehand.
Jared Allen.
2009, Jared Allen.
That was great, yeah.
Brian Robinson, Pat Williams. Kevin Williams was quiet, but he was out front speaking all the time. Brett Favre. Hell, Adrian Peterson was outspoken in his third year in the NFL. John Sullivan, right? Like they just had 7, 8, 9 guys up and down the roster that were sort of like front men for the organization and would speak or criticize or get into it with the media or whatever it was.
Right.
On this team, Thielen will talk, Kendricks a little bit. Kirk he talks, but like he's not a leader. Who else? Like who?
And Kendricks until he talked about Mike after Mike was fired. Kendricks is really, really smart, and he's great on issues, societal. He's not good on the sport itself. Like the team, Eric rarely gives you much.
He's an outstanding player, a little bit quiet. Harrison Smith's that way too. He's like this sort of silent assassin type player,
but I mean,
right?
Both of those guys have a ton of thoughts, clearly, right? But they're not going to say much. But yeah, it's and I think the problem too is when things start to go sideways with GM, coach, and QB, I think it becomes tough because the majority of people try to save their own hides at that point. So if the quarterback's good and leads, I think it galvanizes the entire thing. I'm just cautioning. We do get really caught up in those three, and they all deserve blame. But I think we'll find out from roster changes that it probably went deeper than those three. I think it got into the core of the team at some point.
Meanwhile, the Jaguars they're fishing around different candidates to be their new head coach. Josh McCown is the.
Did you see the PFT story about that today?
No.
The Texans desperately wanted someone else to talk to McCown because they want to name him their head coach.
Oh, so the Texans and the Jaguars are talking to McCown.
But in their mind, if another team talked to McCown, it would justify the hiring in Houston. Houston is beyond dysfunctional.
Jeez.
Like the Texans. I mean, as much as I don't completely trust the Vikings, I am never going to lump them in. Jaguars, Texans, Lions, like that is true dysfunction. They're screwed up.
Man.
Like if you like a person, hire him.
Yeah.
If you're concerned, don't hire him.
By the way, the Giants did just officially announce Joe Schoen as the GM.
And so Joe Schoen's
the first
gone,
domino has fallen.
but was not on the Vikings list. So
He was not, but the Giants, I believe Ryan Poles was one of the finalists there.
He was.
And we'll get into some of this on Purple Daily here, so definitely check us out there. But Courtney Cronin said if Joe Schoen becomes the GM of the Giants, then look for Ryan Poles to be in serious consideration as a potential favorite for the Vikings. So
Cool.
All right. That's your Feedback Friday.
Good stuff.
Comments, questions, concerns, critiques, anything you guys want to hit us with. Every Friday we answer your questions on Mackie and Judd.
I'm good with it.
Teflon Judd.
I don't mind. No, I don't mind it. I don't mind
Negative
the criticism.
Judd.
I don't mind the criticism.
Just gonna go
dish it out. I can
be
take
negative all weekend, drinking your surly and being negative.
Oh, well, yeah, of course. Both those things are true. I'm not going to deny them.
All right, we got to go. We'll see you guys over on Purple Daily. Thanks for hanging out with us, Mackie and Judd.